Right, so who's scary enough to put the frighteners up Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump all at the same time then? Well, it can only be Iran, can't it? The boogeyman of the Middle East, as the West like to paint them. The head of the Axis, the string pullers of all the other designated terror organisations in the region, apart from the ones the West allies itself with and seek to rehabilitate, because they're always an exception, aren't they? The ones we like, well, they're fine, aren't they? Such as the new government of Syria, for example, Islamic State and Al-Qaeda leftovers as they ostensibly are. Well, to be honest, I think Iran secretly enjoys worrying the West on such things. To be honest, I think in a lot of ways the two sides have a lot in common, and to back that assertion up, we've had two Iranian actions revealed in the last few days, the last week, that are both things the West has either attempted or does on a regular basis itself anyway. But perhaps by way of worrying Netanyahu and Trump particularly, Iran have simply proven they're maybe better at this than the West is. Right, so what is the crack this time then, Damo? What have Iran been up to now? Well, worrying the West like the proverbial dog in the paddock full of sheep, and they've done so both in plain sight and behind closed doors, in actions that will put the willies up both Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump, because they've been outplayed and possibly are outgunned here too. For all the rhetoric surrounding a potential strike on Iran, as Netanyahu would love the West to do, that he figures Trump might just be mad enough to actually go for, what has come out this week ought to make both men perhaps pause for thought, not just on the armaments front, it never actually being totally clear what Iran have by weight in its arsenal, but via subterfuge as well, espionage, as it turns out that Iran have successfully infiltrated the Israeli Defense Forces. And this reminds me of the total failure of Israel's attempt to infiltrate the Houthis a few weeks ago that I spoke about, caught out within days as they were, yet the same could not be said of the IDF. Now, given how desperate they have been for new recruits in the IDF, regular viewers of this channel will have heard me talk about the shortages the IDF has in its ranks, the fact they have been, for example, paying out big money to recruit mercenaries to sign up, paying them double even what the average IDF soldier gets, and trying to change the law to force the exempt Haredi Jewish population of Israel to have to do national service as well, to sign up too. An exemption that was laid down as a foundation stone of the state of Israel itself, I might add. So perhaps it's no surprise Iran were able to infiltrate and gain the aid of poorly paid IDF soldiers prepared to aid the enemy, so to speak, for money. The value of the Israeli shekel having yo-yoed throughout the atrocities being performed since October 7th by the genocidal apartheid blue and white state. The capture of two Israelis this week having been caught passing sensitive information to Iranian handlers is actually the second time such an event has been exposed, with 7 Israelis having been detained last October and charged with spying for Iran. And in what is an even bigger indictment, I think, of how bad Israel are at detecting spies within their midst, these 7 were accused of having carried out some 600 espionage missions for Iran, and some of these recruits having allegedly been spying for Iran within the IDF for around 2 years before they were caught. So all of that predates October 7th itself, an indictment of the treatment of the soldiers in the IDF, well before Israel started struggling with recruitment as a result of said atrocities being committed in Gaza. So it does speak to the morale amongst the IDF. And I wonder if the fact all Israelis are forced to do national service adds to that. Many not wanting to do military service, doing so reluctantly. They've got no heart in it, so to speak. Yuri Bar-Joseph, a professor of international relations at the University of Haifa, has stated that he considers there to be 3 main motivators with Iran recruiting spies within Israel, those being ideology, money and pressure. Now, there's no shared ideology, and there's certainly no direct pressure by Iran within Israel. Therefore, it makes sense that Iran only need to flash cash to entice people in. People who may be in more and more financial difficulty as Israel overstretches itself, its economy tanks, its currency value depreciates the more they are making war on others, and even more so when soldiers see all manner of malcontents being paid to join their ranks and getting paid more than they are. And indeed, as this excerpt from the Cradle shows, that very much appears to be the case with the 2 spies that have been caught now. One of the detained soldiers served at an Iron Dome battery and documented classified materials at Iranian handlers' requests, Israeli newspaper Israel Hayom reported on the 27th of January. The other served at the Kiryat base in Tel Aviv, where the Army and Defense Ministry headquarters are located. Both told interrogators that they were struggling financially, and for that reason accepted an Iranian offer. They are reportedly set to be indicted. The spy operation took place in September and October of last year as Israel was at war with Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon. One of the suspects faces a potential life sentence for providing information to Iran during wartime. They were initially requested to spray pro-Iran graffiti in certain areas. One of the soldiers withdrew from the operation when he realized he could face legal repercussions for espionage. The other soldier, who was stationed at an Iron Dome battery, continued to provide his handlers with information and recorded a video detailing the operation of the missile defense system. Israeli army experts who reviewed the video determined that its contents could benefit Israel's adversaries. Yes, one of them even worked at an Iron Dome battery, the best-known Israeli air defense system, and in a way, this should hearten Israel a bit, since clearly Iran don't have the complete measure of these defences, as was surmised to be the real motivation behind their suspiciously easily repelled attack in what they called Operation True Promise 1, following the strike by Israel on the Iranian embassy in Damascus last year. What won't hearten Israel so much is that their secrets were bought via their man in the Iron Dome battery for just $2,500. But where Israel may be reeling somewhat from more spies in their midst and probably ought to be asking, well, how many more are there and how the heck can we find them when we're low on numbers now and we really can't spare more IDF personnel to try and find any more than we might have, Iran have been far more overt in their showing off militarily, shall we call it. And this perhaps will give Trump more pause for thought, because Iran have unveiled weaponry in recent war games, and we know how much the West loves taking part in war games, don't we, to show off their military might. And it's what I mean by Iran and the West being perhaps more similar than either would care to admit sometimes, in that Iran have now engaged in some war games of their own. But what they've unveiled is far beyond what the West thought Iran had in their arsenal, and has really gone to show that what they've fired so far towards Israel, or shown off, the effects they've had, haven't shown the West anything at all that they've really got under the covers. But now Trump is president again. He's a little bit madder than Biden, maybe. Perhaps Iran felt the need to have a bit of a flex. So to that end, Iran, during drills it was carrying out in its southern waters, unveiled a couple of drones, called the Mohajer 6 and the Ababil 5. But it's not the drones themselves that have got the West all hot and bothered, but the missiles they were carrying. Never-before-seen versions of the Qaem and Almas missile, which have been developed inside Iran, but more crucially than that, are both now claimed to be augmented with AI technology. Iran in possession of AI-driven missiles, perhaps. Well, not only does Iran have AI, they've managed to weaponize it in order to improve precision of their weaponry, it seems. Combine that with knowledge of Israel's air defense systems, and depending on the efficacy of such an AI system, you can have weapons here able to completely evade Israel's air defenses, potentially. Now, we only have Iran's word for this, of course. This is largely conjecture. We don't know what kind of espionage has been carried out and by what sort of information has been passed on to the Iranians, other than we know somebody was in the Iron Dome batteries and passing over how the systems work there. But it is a distinctly worrying development for the likes of Trump and his allies if Iran have successfully tested AI missile tech that they themselves are still developing AI tools for. And of course that brings us on to today's biggest story in the way of AI and tech, doesn't it? In light of the most recent AI developments elsewhere, that it becomes an even bigger concern for the West. Because when Trump lined up with all the tech bros at his inauguration, a show of supposed AI supremacy, as that was intended to be, that the US were top of the pile and looked set to stay there for decades. Within 4 days, China launched Deepseek, an AI right up there supposedly with the best in the world, beating ChatGPT, some claim, that cost them just $6 million to develop. It's a chatbot. It's like ChatGPT. It's already taking over as even more popular, trashing the US claims to AI supremacy, where Zuckerberg and Musk and the guy behind Nvidia, who has all the flashy chips, have been spending hundreds of millions on AI development. On the face of it, the US has been completely outflanked here, and AI stocks are going into freefall in the West. This is thus bearing out there is very much something to worry the US here. Investors panicking over it, now wondering where all of their money has been spent and how much of it, when by comparison China have developed the same thing for pennies by comparison. And they've made it open source as well, which is even worse for the US, because it means the general public have all of the source code available now, so anyone can take this chatbot, can make their own modifications to it, plus examine the legitimacy of its power, and basically put the power of creating even more powerful AI off the back of it at the fingertips of everyone on the planet, and not tied up to enrich those US tech bros, plus all the infrastructure that goes with it, from the high-end chips used. Nvidia is now crying into its whatever its silicon-based sink is going to be because their stock falls, to power generation and construction projects to house everything, these server farms and so on and so forth. China have done it all for much cheaper, with much lower powered older chips at that, because China is under sanctions over chips, and they've tanked the AI stock market accordingly. That obviously could end up benefiting Iran and its AI in and of itself. A whole new open source option for them to now explore, potentially, possibly integrate with whatever AI they already claim to have. But both Iran and China are also part of the BRICS economic group as well, which makes you wonder whether that could play a part in future AI developments between those two countries, if indeed Iran even need it. Deepseek is less than a month old, and very rich investors and tech companies are pulling their hair out. Iran, meanwhile, has seemingly weaponized it all whilst benefiting from spies in Israel's midst. Plenty of reason for there to be a lot of squeaky bums from both the US and Israel right now, and pause for thought would probably be sensible for Trump and Netanyahu. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Netanyahu's troubled world, he's attempted to bring the Gaza ceasefire down again, this time by complaining that the wrong sort of hostages were released by Hamas, and therefore they've broken the terms of the ceasefire, and he's now demanding extras be released by recompense. But it hasn't worked. His bluff has been called. Get all the details of his latest desperate attempt to bring down that ceasefire in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe before you do so, though, as this helps support the channel. It's enormously appreciated and also ensures you don't miss out on all new daily content dropping daily. And I will hopefully therefore catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.